Hello, class, and welcome to the second part of our lecture on leadership and rhetoric. And in this part of our lecture, we will be exploring the key aspects of effective communication as well as the ethical considerations within rhetoric. So let's begin off by exploring a little bit about effective communication, because this is a critical component of leadership, obviously, and particularly in the social and community service sector. Good communication can ensure that everyone in the organization is on the same page, working together for the same goals, and that clients receive the best possible care. So in this section of the lecture, we will examine the key components of effective communication and the lessons that can be learned from research literature. So the first component of effective communication is active listening. Active listening means that the leader is present and attentive and focused when engaging with colleagues, with clients and stakeholders. Active listening involves not just hearing what others have to say, but also understanding their perspectives and experiences and needs. When leaders actively listen, they can gain important insights that help them to make better decisions, build stronger relationships, and achieve better outcomes. The second component of effective communication is clarity. Effective leaders are clear and concise when communicating with others. They use language that is easily understood, avoiding jargon or technical terms that might be confusing to others. They also ensure that their messages are consistent, avoiding contradictions or mixed messages that might cause confusion or undermine their trust. And the third component of effective communication is, of course, empathy. Effective leaders should show empathy by putting themselves in the shoes of others and understanding their feelings and perspectives. A little bit of a hint, if a person does not have empathy, they probably shouldn't be a leader, because there's going to be a lot of hurt. So leadership should have a burden, because there is empathy, not be purely for enjoyment. And so a good leader uses empathy to understand and to communicate in ways that are respectful and supportive, taking care not to alienate or offend others. And one lesson that can be drawn from research literature is the importance of communication in building trust. In one study, researchers found that leaders who communicate well are more likely to build trust among their followers, which in turn can lead to improved performance and job satisfaction. Effective communication can also help leaders manage conflict and build consensus, which are critical skills in social and community service sectors. Another lesson can be drawn from research on the importance of communication in promoting innovation. For example, one study found that the researchers found that leaders who communicate well are more likely to foster an environment that encourages creativity and innovation. That's from Wang et al. In 2015. And overall, effective communication can help leaders identify as well as address problems in a timely manner, leading to more effective solutions and improved outcomes. So in essence, effective communication is a critical component of leadership in the social and community service sector. It's really an essential tool for all people in social and community service sectors, because active listening and clarity and empathy are key components of effective communication and the simple care and engagement with other people to show respect, to show care, and to provide a service. Let's go on next in our lecture and discuss the theme of ethical rhetoric and its importance in social and community service work. And here, when we speak of ethical rhetoric, we're really referring to the use of persuasive language and communication techniques to adhere to ethical principles and values. It's not simply about manipulating people, it's helping people be better versions of themselves. It involves the use of language to persuade, to inform, and inspire others, while still adhering to ethical considerations such as the respect for the client's autonomy, to do things that are beneficial for the clients, and the idea of non-maleficence, and justice. So we're being very careful not to cause harm, to create an atmosphere of justice, to respect the autonomy of the client, and to provide benefits to the client. And this is obviously something that all social and community service work should be centered around. Ethical rhetoric is really essential for building trust and establishing positive relationships with clients, with our colleagues as well, and other stakeholders. Ethical rhetoric helps to create a safe and supportive environment in which individuals feel comfortable expressing their needs and concerns. And one example of the importance of ethical rhetoric in social and community service work can be seen in the use of motivational interviewing. And we'll talk about this in later lectures as well. But motivational interviewing is really a communication technique that is used by social service professionals to help individuals explore and resolve their ambivalence about making positive changes in their life. And research has shown that motivational interviewing can be an effective tool for helping individuals to overcome barriers to change and make positive changes in their life. However, for motivational interviewing to be effective, it needs to be ethical and in a manner that respects the individual's autonomy and their values. A person can always say no. An example of ethical rhetoric in social and community service work is in the use of trauma-informed communication. Trauma-informed communication involves using language and communication techniques that are sensitive to the experiences of individuals who have experienced trauma. And research has shown that trauma-informed communication can be an effective tool for creating a safe and supportive environment in which individuals feel comfortable expressing their needs and concerns. Trauma-informed communication involves using language that is respectful and non-judgmental and empathetic. And here are a few examples of ethical rhetoric in practice and where you can draw some lessons from them. And an example would be the Tylenol poisoning crisis. Back in 1982, there were 7 people in Chicago died from ingesting Tylenol that was laced with cyanide. And this incident is widely regarded as one of the most significant product recalls in history because Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Tylenol, immediately recalled all of its Tylenol from all of its shelves all across the world, costing the company an estimated $100 million. And what stands out in this example is Johnson & Johnson's response to the crisis. The CEO at the time, James Burke, took personal responsibility for the crisis and emphasized the company's commitment to consumer safety. He communicated with the public with transparency and empathy, reassuring them that the company was doing everything within its power to ensure that such an incident would never happen again. Burke's ethical rhetoric helped the company retain the trust of the public and eventually regain its market share. And the lesson that can be learned here from business, as far as ethical rhetoric, is that in times of crisis, leaders must communicate with honesty and transparency and empathy. They must take responsibility for the situation and emphasize their commitment to rectify the issue. And this can help to maintain trust of stakeholders and protect the reputation of the organization. Another example is the National Inquiry into the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. In 2015, the Canadian government established the National Inquiry into the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Girls to identify the high rates of violence against Indigenous women and girls in Canada. And the inquiry was completed in 2019 with the final report containing 231 calls for justice. One of the key aspects of the inquiry's ethical rhetoric was its emphasis on centering the voices of Indigenous women and girls. The Commissioner made a deliberate effort to ensure that Indigenous women and girls had the opportunity to share their stories and experiences with the inquiry. The final report's recommendations were grounded in the experiences and perspectives of Indigenous women and girls, and the commissioners emphasized the importance of implementing these recommendations in partnership with Indigenous communities. Now there's some lessons to be learned here. Effective ethical rhetoric must center the voices of marginalized communities and prioritize their experiences and perspectives. Now, in the context of social and community service work, this means ensuring that clients and service users have a meaningful voice in decision-making processes, and that their experiences are taken into account when developing policies and programs. Another example can be taken from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was established in 2008 to address the legacy of residential schools in Canada. The Commission's mandate was to reveal the truth about the residential school system and its impact on Indigenous people, and to chart a pathway forward for reconciliation. And one of the key aspects of the Commission's ethical rhetoric was its emphasis on acknowledging the harm that had been done to Indigenous peoples and committing to reconciliation. The Commission's final report included 94 calls to action, which called on governments and churches and other institutions to take concrete steps towards reconciliation. And the Commissioners emphasized the importance of acknowledging the truth about Canada's history of colonialism and committing to meaningful action to address its legacy. And there's a lesson to be learned here, and that is effective ethical rhetoric must acknowledge past harms and commit to meaningful action to address them. In the context of social and community service work, this means acknowledging the history of colonialism and its impact on marginalized communities, and committing to meaningful action to address the systemic barriers and inequalities that exist. In essence here, ethical rhetoric is an essential component of effective leadership and of communication, particularly in social and community service work. By using ethical communication techniques, by engaging in the ethical practices, social service professionals can establish positive relationships with their clients, with colleagues and stakeholders. They can build trust, they can create safe and supportive environments, and improve the lives of people around them. So, in conclusion, the ability to lead and communicate through ethical rhetoric is really crucial for any worker within social and community service. And good leaders are able to create a culture of trust and respect that enables the organization to thrive and serve the community better. The use of ethical rhetoric promotes transparency and accountability by preventing the spread of misinformation or propaganda. And effective communication ensures that information is disseminated accurately and timely to all stakeholders. It's also important to note that leadership and rhetoric are not fixed traits, but skills that can be developed and improved over time. And leaders should invest in continually learning and developing and keeping up with emerging trends and best practices in the field. They should be open to feedback and criticism and continuously seek to improve their communication skills. So in essence, as a community and social service worker, develop your leadership skills, develop your rhetorical skills, because these are central for you to engage in fundraising. They're essential for you to engage in changing the community. They're essential for you engaging in the simple care of each and one of your individual clients. And I hope you enjoyed this lecture. You take care, and I'll see you next week as we move on to our next lesson.